not having a mic okay? Okay? All right. So thank you for allowing me to be here this morning. It's always a great opportunity to share about the work that I'm doing within a community where I grew up and a community that I love. So just to give you just a little bit of history, I'm from Waco, Texas. Anybody familiar with Waco, Texas? Outside of David Koresh. Think about Baylor, Chip and Joanne, Fixer Upper, you know. One of the things I loved about growing up was my great-grandmother. She was probably my favorite person. And she will, if she was still living today, she will tell you that I was her favorite. Without any reservation, I was her favorite great-grandchild. But one of the things we loved about her was she wasn't like your typical grandmother, right? She was the one that got us hooked on WWE wrestling. So she was a big Hulk Hogan fan and Macho Man Randy Savage. So she got us hooked on that. So all the grandkids would come over and we would just like watch wrestling with grandma. She would try to elbow us every other time or so. But she was wonderful. So not only did she get us hooked on wrestling, but there's another show that she got us hooked on that I still love to this day. And please don't judge me, but it's The Golden Girls. One of my favorite shows. And so you'll catch me probably 11 o'clock at night watching Hallmark, catching The Golden Girls. One of my favorite characters on Golden Girls is Sophia. And I love Sophia because she reminded me of my great-grandmother. She was fiery. You never knew what was going to come out of her mouth. But she always had a story. And one of the things that she would say, and I just loved it, was, and when she said this line, you knew something crazy was going to come after it. Whether it was true or not, you didn't know what was going to come. But she would always say, picture it, Sicily. And then she'll give you a year, and something random would follow that. So, kind of in the honor of spirit of my grandmother and the Golden Girls, picture it, 1989, 1990, Hilltop, Tacoma. One of the most dangerous cities in the nation. At this time, Hilltop was the third most dangerous city following Compton and LA. This was a time where all of the gangs that were under the radar of the police department and FBI and all that were migrating this way to kind of get away from all the buzz that was going on around gangs at that time. So, 89 is the year we moved to the Hilltop, Tacoma. Is anybody familiar with the Hilltop area of Tacoma? All right. So you know some of the history of the area, and so again, this time was a very dangerous time in the area. So much so to where the police department and police officers wouldn't even come down M Street, 23rd and M. They wouldn't touch that area. They left it to the pastors to deal with what was going on in the area at that time. And the pastors in the area had so much respect from the gang members and things like that that they were able to handle whatever situation was going on and then tell the police department how they could fix that. So this was a time where it was really dangerous, and so we had a group of folks that said, we are fed up with lives being cut short, the drugs that are coming through our neighborhoods, the violence that is happening. We want to get in front of this and figure out a solution. And so in a little small office room, these individuals got together and started the Hilltop Action Coalition. And that was about 30 years ago. And it was as a result of what was happening in the Hilltop area. And so fast forward to today, I now serve as the board president for this organization. There's been a lot of transition that has happened within the organization. At one point, there was an executive director, and there was a lot of money flowing through because it was still at a time to where gangs and violence was just at a high rate, and the city was really wanting to push this group to really get behind it. Now, the Hilltop Action Coalition has been around for 30 years, but have only been a nonprofit since 2008. So they started under Associated Ministries, and so what they began to realize is that we're starting to expand, and we need a little bit more space, we need more support, and so they started their own nonprofit, and so still addressing the issues of drugs and crime in the area. Now, here we are in 2018, and we are at a place where I'm happy to say that the drugs, the crime, the violence that plague the Hilltop area has decreased about 88% in the last 10 years. And that's through the efforts of the Hilltop Action Coalition, residents, City of Tacoma, the police department, all these folks who are rallying together to say we want to address these issues and we don't want it here in our neighborhood. Now, a lot of the folks that were the big kind of kingpins, the drug dealers and things like that, now they're in their 50s and they're like, you know, I'm not sure if I really want to sell drugs anymore, or a lot of them ended up in prison and things like that. So we've seen that decrease happening. And so my charge as the president was to come in and really to kind of reestablish this organization. We were at a place to where the city was saying, hey, we're probably not going to be funding you all anymore because you're doing the same work that's happening on the east side and all these other parts of town, so we can't keep funding this work. So where are you all going to lean into, and how are you going to support the Hilltop neighborhood? Which brings us to where we are now. If you are reading the newspapers, if you're seeing things on the news, you know that the Hilltop is being gentrified. We have folks from Seattle who can't afford to live in Seattle coming to the Tacoma area, and primarily they're coming to the Hilltop because it's the creme de la creme, they say. It's the place to be for what's going to happen. The Link Light Rail is coming right through our area. That's going to be a big thing for us. But in that, we know that as that happens and more folks move to the area, it's pushing folks out who have been in the Hilltop for 30, 40, 50 years. A lot of those folks are the folks who were part of the Hilltop Action Coalition as really wanting to ensure that our neighborhood is healthy, safe, and vibrant. So it's sad to see that a lot of those folks are being pushed out because they can no longer afford to live in the area. So a lot of our work right now is not around gangs and violence and drugs or anything like that. Our work is around housing, affordable housing, addressing the issues of Hilltop being gentrified. Homelessness is at a rate that we are, it seems like every day we're kind of losing our grip on where we are as far as homelessness. I sat in a meeting yesterday with the Housing Authority where we were talking about 60 individuals sleeping in People's Park without a place to go. And so we're seeing this continually happening, and it's just at a place to where we can't control it. And so we are working with many organizations around how do we address these issues. The Tacoma area, we're probably about 2.5, 3 years behind the gun on addressing homelessness, housing. So we're really trying to pick it up and really figure out how do we get a handle on this. So we're doing a lot of work with Sound Outreach, the City of Tacoma, the Housing Authority, Safe Streets, to really figure out how do we get folks in homes. Has anyone heard about the Tiki Apartments situation that was going on? So we're doing a lot of work around that, and that seems to be, that was one situation that has spiraled into many others. We have a lot of individuals right now that are living in apartments that landlords have said, we'll put you on month to month, and during that month to month, They're saying, I'm raising your rent $300, $400, $500 more, and those folks can afford to live there. So as of right now, just yesterday afternoon, we have 40 people that will not have a place to live in the next 30 days. And there's nowhere for them to go in the Hilltop. Affordable housing is almost at a loss. Low-income housing is virtually non-existent. And so trying to get people placed is really difficult. So what happens when they can't find a place to live in the Hilltop? They are going out to Lakewood, some folks University Place, and beyond. and therefore we lose folks who are Hilltop natives. And that's due to the developments, buildings being sold, folks coming in, buying them up and saying, I don't want to take Section 8, or I'll put you on month to month and I'll raise the rent to where you can't afford it, and that's how I displace you. So there's a lot of work that we're doing around that, and so it's been challenging, right? We love new business. We want new business. The Hilltop at one point in the 90s, as I was growing up, walking the streets, from Johnson's Candy was where we would start. And we always got the sweet stuff, and then we would go further down. So Johnson's Candy is where we would start and go all the way down to about 19th. And in that distance, we had the majority of that area minority-owned business in the 90s. Now we're down to about 7 minority-owned businesses. And that's challenging. It's hard to watch, and we're seeing new business come through, but some of those businesses do not reflect what the Hilltop is about, or the culture, or the history. And folks are feeling unwelcomed in certain establishments due to the name or the clientele that's there, so they don't feel there's some ownership. So we're dealing with the housing, we're dealing with the business aspect of it. So it's been really challenging. And so I've been going around talking with folks and just encouraging them to, if you're in the Hilltop area, or you're connected with folks at the city level or things like that, or folks that live in the area, really pushing them on getting around these issues as far as housing, getting around the issues as far as employment. I serve as the co-chair of the Hilltop Engagement Committee, to where we are talking about the Link Light Rail that's coming through. How do we, the jobs that will come from that, how do we keep the jobs local? Because if the jobs are local, there's a better chance that folks can get a really decent wage and be able to live and stay here, instead of outsourcing from these larger organizations. So we're working to get folks trained, apprenticeships, the work that they need to be able to sustain and to be able to live in the Hilltop. It's a beautiful area. You know, there was one point where people would drive through and not even stop in the Hilltop. But now it is like an oasis that people want to come to. But it's challenging. If you've been to Northeast Portland in the last few years, they're saying that the Hilltop in the next 10 years is going to mirror what Northeast Portland looks like. So we're going from the classic old style homes to the very flat, clean lined homes. So that's what, I mean, there's 3 right now in the Hilltop, and I'm like, is this the Hilltop that I remember? And this is right around the corner from where I live, and I'm seeing these homes look like they're in Malibu, right? But it's challenging, and it's hard to watch. And so there's some great work happening around these issues. Tough conversation. It's really hard to talk about people being displaced. It's hard to actually see people being packed up and moved out. I've helped at least 5 individuals in the last 6 months move out of the Hilltop area, and it's gut-wrenching. And as an individual who I work, I make a decent salary, and I'm concerned about myself in the next 2 years. I'm thinking, how's it going to look for me? My house, my housing taxes have gone up so much in just a year and a half, and I've owned my home, that I'm like, whoa, this is this is spiraling out of control. So I can only imagine folks who are on the fixed income, very limited resources, what things are looking like for them. And I'll kind of end with this. So the Hilltop Action Coalition is not my full-time job. I do youth work, and I'm involved in the community at many levels. But I spend my day off in the Hilltop Action Coalition office, working with our staff there. And we've had, see, we're in mid-July now, so since May, probably at least 15 or so folks come in with stacks of papers that are offers for the homes that they live in. Some 10, 15, one was $30,000 over what their house is worth, or valued at. These folks are on Saturdays coming to the Hilltop community, walking around with cameras, taking pictures of homes, vacant properties, wherever, and researching them, finding who the owner is or whatever, and saying, I'll give you $20,000 over what this is worth if you would sell. Now, the problem with that is you have, and I always say Mrs. Johnson, because Mrs. Johnson was the lady that baked apple pies and set them in her window on the weekends, and so when we would walk down the alley, we would smell that pie, and we'd go to Mrs. Johnson. So she's always my go-to person when I share this. But we have folks like Mrs. Johnson, who's been living in the Hilltop for 40, 50 years. She passes away, leaves her home to her children. There's so much work to be done on the home that the kids can't afford to keep it up. So when somebody says, hey, here's $20,000 over what the house is worth, guess what the children do? Sell it. And there goes the house that has been in their family for generations. And now it's gutted out, it's sometimes torn down or whatever, and now that house is sold for double of what it was valued at, right? So those are things that are happening. So we're looking at land trusts for the community. How do we get folks around owning property and really passing it on to other folks in the area? So there's so much work that's being done. I love the Hilltop community. I know it's a beautiful place. It's a vibrant place. It will continue to be an amazing place, but we don't want to displace people at the expense of having a vibrant community with beautiful restaurants. We want folks to have their blood, sweat, and tears invested into the community to be able to remain here. If you've been in the Hilltop, down the MLK corridor, you see lots of murals. And those murals depict the folks who have laid an amazing and tremendous foundation for the Hilltop community. And not just Hilltop, but for Tacoma. And when those folks some of them have passed away, but others who are here, but when they are gone, we want to be able to maintain the essence of that culture, and we're seeing that being diminished more and more as new folks are moving in. I had somebody say to me the other day, we went to a restaurant in the Hilltop. Whenever I have a meeting, it's always I'm at a coffee shop or the restaurant in the Hilltop. That's where I like to meet. And this lady says to me, she's living in the Hilltop now. She said, I can't find a place to park in this parking lot. Who's this Alberta, Canada lady? Like, what is this? And I was like, well, if you look at the apartments across the street, those are the Alberta, Canada apartments. She's a trailblazer for housing and equity here in the Hilltop. And she said, wow, I had no clue. So she was upset about parking, but had no clue that the folks that live in those apartments had no parking. And so there was a lot of work to be done to get them some parking, and it just so happened to be in the lot that's by the restaurant that people now have to park on the street for. But to teach people about Alberta, Canada, we're doing that more often. We have to teach people about the history of the Hilltop instead of folks knowing the history, if that makes sense. So there are more things like that, and the challenge in that is sometimes folks don't understand where we are and what's happened in the area. There's a gentleman by the name of Steve Smith who for 30 years has cleaned the Hilltop from 9th all the way to 14th. And I got a call in my office one day, and this lady says, there's this African-American gentleman with an orange hoodie on at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, looking very suspicious in the Hilltop area. I'm really nervous about what's going on. I'm trying to walk my dog, and I just feel unsafe. I said, well, could you describe him again? She says, well, he's older, really dark skin, orange sweatshirt. I was like, oh, that's Steve. Steve has cleaned the Hilltop for 30 years for free every morning. So when you walk your dog, there's no glass on the ground. There aren't needles everywhere. And she said, wow, I had no clue. Now her and Steve are like best friends. But those moments, so those are things we're having to do more of when folks are coming to the Hilltop. But I'll stop there. I just want to give you that history of where we are. Keep the Hilltop lifted up in your thoughts and prayers. There's so many things that are changing at a rate that we are just feel like we're spinning our wheels to get a handle on things. And so I can take a few questions if folks have them. Yes.